Hey guys, so we're back after a long time of inactivity. I was very dedicated to the project that we are currently running. It's the game called Astra, and it needed a lot of my attention the previous months. But I do plan on finishing this tutorial series on YouTube, so we are going to continue from where we were left off. Quick heads up on the updates. I have polished the textures here. You can get the images from the link in the description. And I also added a new layer. It's called Room Zero Stuff. And I did that in order for these boxes and barrels here to render in front of the player, because it looks weird when the player goes here and the player gets to be in front of them. Um, and also I didn't like how the light worked in Godot. It didn't match the light that I had in Photoshop. So instead of using this shader here, I disconnected this link here, and I changed the value of the modulate here to this value, and it works better for me. But it's just a light. It's a flat color, and you can play with it however you like. Also, make sure that you have the Z index here to 3, foreground here 3, Z index in the light also 3, and the player should be I think 2. Here, player. It's 1, but it's better to be 2 because you will do other stuff that you will need to be rendered in front of those. One more thing, I lowered the staircase because I want to put something here in this wall uh, in this wall area. So because I did that, I needed to rearrange the climb area. So go ahead and fix the colliders again, and also in the navigation polygon match the stepping area here in the top of the staircase. I also updated the move animation, so you will find the sprites in the link provided. There are fewer sprites this time. I compressed the animation. It's 16 sprites. So if you go to the player and in the move animation, replace all the sprites and set the FPS to 12 instead of 24, because it will match better the movement. But you can also try different values. Maybe if 14 is also good, but for me 12 works good. So if I hit play now, you can see all these changes here take place. Okay, one last thing I like to do, and we will be clear with the settings and setups. This is rather optional. You can go here to the settings and go rendering and go environment, and I will change this to black because I like the surround to be black. And also you will notice this line here. I'm not sure why this happened, but in order to eliminate this, just go here and expand the foreground just a tiny bit in order to cover this line. And with that done, you can see that if I hit play and extend the window, you can see now that with the black environment, my scene is better framed. Okay, with that being done, let's jump right into the code. What I want to do today is interactions. I want to have specific objects that will exist in the scene, and the player can click on them, approach them with a character, and then interact with them. And every object will have a unique interaction. So I'm going to create a new node, which will be an area 2D node. And of course, every area 2D node needs a collision shape. Collision shape 2D. So this area 2D will be called interaction objects and will contain all of my objects that will be interactable. Every individual collision shape that I will have will be a different interaction. So I will need a new shape here. Let's make a rectangular shape. And of course, I need to set the Z index to like 1 or 2 or blah 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 blah. Where are you, my friend? Ah, here you are. Okay, so I'm gonna take this here. And set the Z index to 2. And give it a sprite. So it is visible in the scene. And I'm gonna use the Godot icon here. And adjust it so it approximately fits the collision shape here. Good. So now I want to send a signal whenever my player clicks on an interaction area, because it's not going to be only this one. It may be some other areas too that will have some collision shapes, and whenever my player clicks on these borders on this area, I want him to approach this area, go to a specific point and interact with them. So I'm going to send a signal here. I'm going to, in my interaction objects, go to the node, and you can see here I have my input event signal. And I'm going to click, right click and connect. And I want to connect it to my control here. So now I have a function called onInteractionObjects input event. And I'm having some parameters here which will be useful. So I'm going to use the event system and say, like here, if the player hasn't clicked, then just return. I don't want to do anything. I only want to interact when my player clicks on this item. So what I want to do in this function here is two things actually. The one is that I want to tell the player that he is going to interact, and the second is that I want to tell the player which object is that he's interacting with. So in order to do that, I need two parameters for the player. So I'm going to player motion and will define those. The one is a boolean actually, and it's called is going to interact. So what I'm using this for is that, okay, I want the player to click, for example, here and move to this point in order to interact. But while moving, I want to know that when he reaches this area, this point, he will interact. So the player must know beforehand that he is going to interact when he will reach his destination. So that's why I'm using this parameter here. And the other one is the object that he's going to interact with. So it's going to be called interactable object. And I'm going to the control here and say that player is going to interact equals true, and player interact, how was it called? Yeah, interactable object. object is equal to, before I do that, I need to get the interaction objects from my scene. Interaction objects. So just like I did with the player, I'm gonna get this variable here, which will be interaction objects. Okay, so we're having that. I'm going to say that the interactable object, the current interactable object that the player is going to interact with, it's going to be the interactionable objects get child and shape index. So what I'm saying here is I'm detecting which child of the interactable object I'm currently in. So I'm having this parameter here, and it's saying that whichever collision shape I clicked on, it's the current interaction object. So that's why I need to define that. Okay, one more thing before we move on is that I'm setting here the is going to interact to true, but I haven't reset it yet, and I need to know when my player is not going to interact. So I'm going to do it here. Wherever I move, I want to know that if when I reach my destination as a player, I'm going to interact, or I'm just going to stand there. So it's the difference between I just move to an area or I just move to interact to an interaction area. So whenever I click somewhere else on the screen and not on an interaction, I'm going to reset my interaction. So I'm going to show you what this means is that, for example, I'm the player here, and I want to interact with this object. So I'm clicking on this object and I'm starting moving towards it. But if I click somewhere else, for example here, then my player will start to move there and will reset its interaction. So it's not going to the player is not bounded to interact before he reaches the point. So that's why I'm resetting the interaction here. And the reason why this works is because this happens after this. Because this is a signal, this will occur after this function. And because these functions happen and the same update, right? Because even if I click anywhere, this function will happen. But it's not going to happen because I'm going to overwrite it with this function. Okay, so now that I know when he's going to interact, look what I'm going to do. I'm going to my player motion script here, and in the move along path that's happening when my player is in the move state, I know that when he reaches his destination, he goes to idle. But I'm going to add a new condition here and say that if the player is going to interact, then instead of going to idle, you're going to go to the interact state. So I'm just gonna copy the state here, or rather this command here, and say that you're going to interact. Else, yeah, you're going to the idle state. And of course, here in my change state function, I have a new condition on the interact and say you're going to play the interact animation, which of course I haven't implemented yet. And I don't have an animation yet for the player from the interaction, so I'm just going here, create a new animation, call it interact of course, and just add my player sprite, the default sprite. for now. Okay, so now, no wait, I'm also going to print the debug here and say interact, yay, so that I know that I have indeed interacted. So let's test that. So I'm clicking here, and if I go to my output, you'll see that I get the message interact, yay. So we're doing good so far. So now I want the interaction to actually happen, because I know that I interact and my player knows that he's interacting, but what does actually happen? What is going on with their interaction? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to my scripts and I'm going to create actually a new folder, and I will call it interactions. And here will be all my interactions that I'm going to implement, because it is not one interaction general, but is a lot of different interactions. And every unique interaction will have its own script. So new script here and call it interaction template. So this will be my general template that I will override for every interaction, but I will have something that I can step on, something that every interaction will have and will help me implement the code, the general process of how everything works. So every interaction will have a function called interact. So every time I get an interaction, my control unit will say, hey, you will going to interact. So I'm going to call the interact function of your script. So I'm going to create an interact function, and for now, what I'm going to do here is just print the message and say I am interacting. And of course, so yeah, I'm going here now that I have that, and I'm going to say here that the object that is I'm going to take the object that is going to interact, the node rather. So again, I find the current interaction object by its index, and I'm going to call the interact function here. So in order for this to work, in order for this to work, I must have an interact function for every interactable object. Of course, I need first to pass the script here, and yeah, let's click play. And you will see that when I'm clicking here, I am indeed interacted, or rather the interaction actually takes place, but it takes place sooner. It's actually happens the moment I click, and I want to happen when I reach my destination. So instead of doing this here, instead of telling the interactable object to interact here, I'm just going to do it here whenever I change my state. So when a player is interacting, then the interaction actually happens. So I have my interactable object in my player, and that's how it's easy for me to access it and just tell it to interact. Okay, so in order to see this interaction actually happen, I'm going to create an animation for this sprite here. I'm just going to go to the sprite and click on the animation tab, and actually create an animation player within my sprite and create a new animation, and I will call it, of course, interact, in order to be consistent. Now I just want this animation to have half-second duration, and what I'm going to do is very simple. I'm just going to go here. Make sure you lock this key here, so you can also transform the shape of your sprite. And I'm just going to set a keyframe here, and let's go somewhere there and stretch it. Oops. Stretch it, and then put the keys here, and in order to close the animation, just go here, select these sprites, and right click and duplicate them. So this is the animation that I'm playing right now. If I click play, just like that. And in order for this to happen, I just need to go here to my interact function and just say, I actually need to get the node, which is, so I'm currently in this node, right, in the collision shape. And I want to take the sprite node of my collision shape, and then again I need to get the animation layer node, and from that I'm going to say play the interact animation. Now before I hit play, I also want to do one more thing, and that is I want to define a specific location, a specific point that I want my player to reach in order for this animation to happen. Because right now, if I click whenever in this box, in this collision shape here, the player will go to this point. But I want to click in this animation area, in this interaction area, and the player to go in a specific location. So for example, if it's a machine that it has a button, I want to click in the machine wherever, if whenever the part of the machine is in my screen, but the player will go to the specific location where the button is. So in order to do that, I'm simply going to create a position node. I'm just going to take one position, and I'm simply going to put this position wherever I want my player to go. I'm going to put it here, or rather here. And here I'm setting an already var rather, which is called destination, and it's going to be equal to the get node, the node is called position 2D, and get global. I think it was called get global. Yeah, get global position. Get node. Nice. And for this to work, I need to go to my control and find this new path. Find this new path that I'm calling here. I don't need this because I do it, as I mentioned before, the play here motion, and copy this, find a new path for my player, and instead of the mouse position, it's going to be the interactable object, get the child, get the appropriate object, and take the destination of this object. And as I do here, I need to reset my path for the player. And I'm not going to copy this for the lines because I want to show you the difference in the execution. And the reason this works is because, as I told you before, these things override these. So the path will be overwritten. So now I'm going to click play. And you can see now that if I click here, I will go there and you see that I'm getting the messages in time. But if I click on the top of the sprite, I will also go to this position as a player. And of course, I can change the Z index on the player can render in front, but that's a minor thing. But that's a minor thing. So you see that my line shows there because this is where I was supposed to go, but my interaction resets that. And you see that if I click here and then click there, I'm just resetting the interaction, and it doesn't happen. So I go in there, I'm interacting, I leave, I can interact again, and this is how it works. And of course, I forgot to pass this function here, which is my process function, which calls every state the corresponding function of every state I'm in. And this here, of course, needs to be reset. And of course, I was super careless here. I thought I had put that in the interact state, but that was my idle state. Let's leave that as it was, and I think we're good. So now that I have hit play, you will see that I'm going to interact here. Look, I cannot move, and after 1 second I can. So yeah, that's how the interaction works right now. Of course, we will build on that. We will have different kind of interactions. Some interaction might need an item. Some other interactions will be informative interactions. So I will click, for example, this portrait here, and there will be a UI message that will give me information about this portrait. So we will have different kind of interactions, and we will work on that in the future videos.